Welcome everyone to this third interview for Flambeau Noir, the International Left-Hand Path Conference 2017. Today I have with me the esteemed Dr. Thomas Karlsson, all the way from Stockholm, Sweden. Hi, Mr. Thomas. Could you
hi, Justin.
could you give us a brief introduction on some of your work and what you do?
I think the reason why I'm invited to Flambeau Noir, which I'm very happy for, is that I'm founder of the international left-hand path order Dragon Rouge, which I founded when I was quite young, and we have been around now for more than 25 years. I also study esotericism as an academic, so I try to balance these two aspects of esotericism: the practical initiatory esotericism, which is my main mission in Dragon Rouge, but also academic and studies at the universities to see the history of magical practices, alchemy, Qabalah, and how it has been practiced through the ages, to give us knowledge of the historical background, even for contemporary movements.
Right. Good. So then let's just get right into that then. How do you describe some of the defining features of the left-hand path? Like, what is it? What are some of its characteristics, and how do you compare it to the right-hand path?
That's a very good question. And sometimes when I go to my mundane work, I meet old friends from schools, back in the days, and they come to me, "Oh, Thomas, haven't you founded an occult order, Dragon Rouge or something?" And I say, yes, I don't want to, it's not that we must spread the word. It's more like an inner quest rather than something that we should tell everyone to do. And then I often get the next question, but it's something with the left-hand path, right? And I honestly say, of course, yes, it's left-hand path. But what's left-hand path? And it could be on the subway, on the metro.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's impossible to define in a simple way, and that's one of the most important things with the left-hand path. It shouldn't be easy to define, because it is a path into realities that's beyond words, which is also the reason why Dragon Rouge choose to have a symbol as a center of the organization or order, rather than one specific culture. We could have named it like the Order of Loki, or the Order of some deity. Right. But from the very beginning, we thought that the left-hand path is a kind of meta concept that's beyond any human culture or tradition, and we can see some patterns. It's possible, maybe, to do some definitions of what the left-hand path could be. But at the same time, left-hand path always goes away from easy definitions. But there are some points, I think it's common for all left-hand path systems. Emphasizing the dark, of course. Right. The dark deities of different traditions, while the right-hand path usually turn to the more common light, so to speak, deities. So if in Nordic tradition, right-hand path systems are more focused on sed and tradition and the gods like Thor, we can see in the Nordic tradition that it's more focused from the left-hand path perspective to Hel, to the children of Loki, etc. Yeah. And in the biblical tradition, of course, it is the bad boys like Lucifer, Lilith, Leviathan, Satan, and so on. One also important thing that has been highlighted is that correlation between the left-hand path and the feminine aspects of spirituality. And not all kinds of feminine aspects, but the dark and sometimes aggressive forces of the feminine, as we can see, for example, in a goddess like the Indian Kali.
So you have quite a few books. You've made, I would say, a career in the occult. So you have a few projects coming out this year, such as the 4th edition of Qabalah, Qliphoth and Goetic Magic, in its English translation.
Right.
It just came out in its, is it Spanish or Portuguese?
Both.
Oh, both, okay. And as well as French, yes, which I'm looking forward to getting. And then also you're working on the 2nd edition to Uthark, Nightside of the Runes.
That's correct.
Yeah. So do you have, or can you give the viewers some descriptions of these two really excellent books? I've read both of them, and give some details on kind of what it is and maybe what they might find that would be new in the new editions.
When it comes to Uthark, it starts to be so much changes in the book and so much new material. So I've not decided yet if it will be a new revised edition or if it turns out to be a new book. Okay. That could be a good complement or complementary to Uthark, Nightside of the Runes.
Right.
But basically, the concept of Uthark is to continue the ideas created or discovered, depending on perspective, by the Swedish professor Sigurd Agrell, who meant that the secret of the runes become apparent if you take the first rune of the, so to speak, exoteric rune row and put it in the end, and then you can see how this could correspond to other ancient mystery cults, such as the Mitra cult, the Greek initiatory mystery cults, and he compared then the runes with the initiatory cults from classic time. It's a very intriguing concept of the runes, which I worked a lot with. But it's not that it's either one system or another, because you can use them at the same time, and it gives you different perspectives on the runes, which have so much knowledge inherent in themselves. So I sometimes myself work with other systems than Uthark, even if I'm personally very fond of it.
Yes.
Qabalah Qliphoth is maybe my at least this far most important book, because it describes the foundation of Dragon Rouge with the description of the Qabalah and quite a detailed discussion of the view on evil and the dark side and what it could be, and what's the consequences if we read the Kabbalistic scriptures from this other perspective, looking at the Kabbalistic writings from the perspective of the serpent in the Garden of Eden as a hero rather than as the enemy of man.
Right.
So it describes the foundation of the initiatory system of Dragon Rouge and the different Qliphoths and dark spheres that will lead in the end to man becoming, as the serpent of Eden promised, an illuminated being, a divine being. In the end, the tree of knowledge will once again be combined with the tree of life.
So Thomas, you've also created some really great paintings for Qabalah, Qliphoth, Goetic Magic, and you've also made other paintings for some other authors, some they'll be releasing this year or next year, and possibly beforehand as well. Can you tell me some of your views on art in the occult, and maybe how these subtle forms of communication help us to understand these large concepts, like the black flame for once?
When it comes to the occult and magic and how to develop as human beings and spiritual beings, words are of course of great value, but sometimes it's very hard to describe all the mysteries with words, even if you write and write and write and publish a lot of books, because some parts of the mysteries are easier to illustrate through music and art.
Right.
And my interest in the occult have always been strongly connected to my interest in music and art and more or less all forms of artistic expressions.
Yeah.
I went to art school for 1 year for that reason before I started my more typical academic career. But art is for me a way to work with seals, called seals in the grimoire tradition, in the books of magic, has been a way to communicate with the spirits, and you combine words, you combine incantations, invocations with the different seals, and in that way art and the painting can be a way to create the communication with the spirit realm and with the other side.
So with that, is there anything else that you're working on that you could talk about right now at this point?
My focus right now, besides trying to be a decent family father, is the next edition of Uthark.
Okay.
And how we can see how different parts of the Nordic myths and traditions corresponds very well with the left-hand path. So my focus will be to trace aspects of the Nordic traditions that haven't even symbolically in the shadow.
Okay.
So my focus right now is more to look at the picture stones on Gotland, and also see how things in our biology corresponds to myths and to non-physical aspects of existence. From an academic point of view, I'm a little bit on the same track, studying what's going on in the brain during astral projections and spiritual experiences. But I will look at that from my perspective as a historian and scholar of religion.
Right.
But with the cooperation with the people working with the chemistry of the brain, and we can in that way give knowledge to each other from our different perspectives.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds really interesting. Will you be doing any sort of since you're a teacher, but will you also be releasing academic papers on that?
Yeah, it will be some academic papers.
Okay.
Probably it will be focused on 3 papers that I will release in a publication.
Okay. Oh, interesting. Well, I look forward to reading that. So more bringing it to more a personal level, on your journey in your life, since you've been pretty much a practitioner your entire life, can you tell us one or two things that kind of stood out for you as major learning points or realizations?
Yeah. First, I would say when I realized that I all my life have had what have been referred to as paranormal experiences. All my life, astral projection has been very natural, but so natural that I didn't understand that people could think of it as something unnatural. But when I was 12, I started to read a little bit about the occult and realized that, okay, this is something that people consider to be special, even people feared. So when I was around 12, it was a very important part of my life when I realized, okay, what's natural for me is considered to be occult.
Right.
The next important part was when I went to on a journey with the goal of meeting the Dogon tribe in Mali, which fascinated me a lot. It ended up with a very weird road movie-like journey down through Europe, going to Morocco, and ended up in Marrakesh in Morocco. Mm-hmm. And I was told by a person there, I don't know still why or what it really was, but he came to me when I was sitting lonely at the cafe, that hi, and introduced himself very briefly, and then said to me, old temples will fall, new temples will be created, temples for the red dragon. When I came home from that journey, I made the decision to create the order Dragon Rouge. Right.
That's fascinating. That's a that's a big experience. I think if you don't follow that, it's a life wasted almost. That seems
for sure. And this is also described in my book amongst mystics and magicians in Stockholm, yes. Which of course is based upon Alexandra David Nell's description of when she went to Tibet. But the idea and the concept of the book is that you must travel. You must travel outside yourself in different ways. Maybe travel around the world, maybe travel beyond your body, but at the same time, the maybe most important part is when you come back to yourself from your starting point.
That is very true. I believe that among mystics and magicians in Stockholm, that's one part series. It's supposed to be a series of books. Is that correct?
Yeah. But right now I'm. It's actually because lack of time. But I have to focus on some projects. Otherwise, it can be like you're having 10 different projects. Yeah. Started writing part 2 and 3. The part 2 will be about the early days of Dragon Rouge. Okay. And the project title is A Necromancer's Diary. And the third part, the project title is At the End of the Left-Hand Path, which is of course emphasizing the idea that the end of the left-hand path is always a new start and the beginning.
Right. So, kind of coming back again also with Qabalah, Qliphoth and Goetic Magic, you speak about, I'm not necessarily you personally, but more looking at the Jewish traditions and mysticisms of what evil is. but could you give a little more of a definition of what you might think it is? Why do you think it's present or prevalent in society and religions, and why is it such a big thing?
That is an aspect of the left-hand path which is important also for what we can do for society. Because if it's something we have learned from history, that it is never the people who think that they themselves are evil or belonging to the dark side who make the most destructive things. It is always the people who believe that they do that for the sake of good, and because they are good and they have God and they have the political reasons to force their ideas upon other people. So if we look at this from the perspective of what we also can do for society, if we go into deeper knowledge of what the myths are telling us and what the occult tradition are telling us, going into the concepts of evil and going into the concepts of dark will make us better humans. Maybe if you would use that term, gooder humans and more enlightened humans, because you don't just go for the cliches of what's good and what's light, because most of the really terrible things that's happened through history has always been in the name of the good, and that's why the myths and the occult tradition can teach us so much as human beings if we study the dark side.
Great. So with that, it quickly comes to mind that what does the black flame mean for you? What is your black flame? Now I know this is kind of a broad term, but whatever you can give it is perfect.
I would say the black flame, it's Kundalini Shakti. It is something that is deep inside us, the driving force, strongly connected to Shakti, to Kundalini, that burn and transform. It's also connected to the rays of the black sun, which nourish if we sacrifice what is bad, garbage in our lives. The black flame transform it into energy and into something, heat in the good way, that make it possible for us to live, to survive, to continue our journey. So the black flame to me is strongly connected to Lilith, to Kali, to Hel in the Nordic tradition, and the left-hand path concept of Illumination.
So we've already kind of spoken a bit about this, but since you're a family man, you're a scholar, and you're also a practitioner. So what does a kind of typical day look like for you, and how does that help manifest your illumination? A
quite typical day for me is looks quite much the life of anyone else with children, job, family, etc. So I don't worship Satan 24 hours. Actually, I think it's also important that you must be able to live, so to speak, normal life and make a normal career and focus upon things outside your occult practices, because it also is good for your occult practices. Mm-hmm. You can, of course, for some parts of your life, isolate yourself from the world and practice the magical arts all the time. But at least from my interpretation and the interpretation of Dragon Rouge, the left-hand path is far from escapism. You must go in, so to speak, both directions, seeking for the unknown, seeking for the other side, but also let the other side give energy and knowledge back to your everyday life, so that you can be a person that is a pillar and that can help people on their road, both in the normal life and in the spiritual life.
Right.
So my everyday, a typical day for me is leaving and picking up children at the preschool, work, sitting on waiting for a bus, or sitting in big city traffic, trying to read a little bit, swearing about the traffic, and drinking a lot of coffee. But some days I have the possibility and the privilege to work in some of my temples, which I have home, or Dragon Rouge Stockholm temple, and go deep inside the magical work of the draconian current and tradition.
Good. So this is our last question. Is there anything you'd like to say to our listeners, our viewers?
First of all, I'm very happy that this conference continues, and I know how hard it is to organize things in real life. There is a lot of people that just sitting and pretending to work with the occult, but you must also show with results in real life that you, for example, can cooperate with other people to prove for yourself and for the spirits that you have learned something from your occult practices. And that's the Flambeau Noir, a great example of a concrete manifestation of the occult into something that's also real on the physical plane. And I look forward very much to meet both the other speakers and artists and the audience. And I think the left-hand path should never go into this kind of dogmatic discussions about what is true left-hand path and so on, because that's a dead end. It becomes like the bad sides of theology, that the left-hand path is a mysterious path, and we must just accept it, and that the mundane definitions will differ, and that's the beauty of it all.
Right. So is there, do you have any websites or social media that you'd like to promote, or where people could find you?
I would recommend then the Dragon Rouge website,
okay.
Which is,
I think that's dragonrouge.net.
That's true. And it's also a good meeting point with other members and people into the Draconian current. Of course, it's for members, but you will meet a lot of very skilled magicians, both male and female, and from different backgrounds, with the different knowledges and professions in the occult. So yeah, I think that's the best way to start.